You are at the perfect place because guess what today's topic is about? What's next for leaders in a very VUCA world? So you are in the right place, given the right context for it. And thank you so much, Ajitha, for coming and speaking to our community. A little about Ajitha. She's passionate as an educator and as a leadership coach. And you can clearly see it in her posts on LinkedIn. She speaks a little bit about a different dimension, which comes more from an inner operating system, a healerpreneur mindset, which is very unusual to hear about in the business world. So thank you, Ajitha, for taking that courageous leadership stand in your education model. Well, a little fun fact, not so fun, but more like interesting fact. Ajitha is also winner of Miss India DC in the 2020 and Miss Indian Diva 2020 beauty pageants. And she was on the runway of New York Fashion Week in 2022. There you go. So here we bring you a business leader who's multifaceted and courageous to speak of things which are usually not spoken about in business and introducing to us what leadership is in a VUCA world. Thank you, Ajitha.
Thank you so much, Meenakshi, for that very beautiful and kind introduction. And I'm so grateful for each one of you. You could have been anywhere else this evening, but you chose to be here. And I don't take that lightly. And I'm very, very blessed to be sharing everything that I have traversed through my journey of transformation, both personally and professionally, with all of you this evening. My goal really is to finish my presentation within 30-35 minutes. I may or may not stick to it, but that's my desire. And open up space for dialogue. So whatever I'm sharing today is, of course, stuff that I've read, and most of it I have implemented. But I'm kind of packaging all of that in 35 minutes. It's quite a task, and I am doing my best, I should say. But I really am looking forward to what does this presentation invoke in you. I want to have that as a dialogue towards the end of, I'm hoping to give about 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes for us to have an open conversation about it. And that's really the intention with which I'm going to be sharing what I've prepared for all of you and for this audience today. So with that said, I will start my, okay, I was just about to start sharing. I think I may need rights to share my screen. Okay. There we go. Thank you so much. Yep. All right. Okay. So my title, for what it's worth, I will say, I call myself Creative Consciousness Leadership Coach. And I'm also paraphrasing it with Recovering Enterprise Agile Coach. And I'll explain why as I go through this presentation. Okay. And for the record, I got certified as an Enterprise Agile Coach back in 2021 and did a whole 24 months of stint of that with L'Oreal in their Americas division, and then decided to pursue my path as Creative Consciousness Leadership Coach. So more on that as we go along. Before I get started with the presentation, I do want to share that everything I'm sharing here, suggestions, ideas, solutions, are of course my perspective and are not meant to be substitute for any of your professional consultations that you may have to have with your service providers. And of course, everything I'm sharing here has come from some source, and I've given due credit. And wherever I have mashed it up in my own brain and the way my brain processed it, I've also kind of put it together with that reference. I do want to invite all of you to keep an open mind and a heart as you listen to this presentation. And most importantly, please take what resonates and discard the rest. And the last statement that is super important, and I feel very related to that statement, is all learning is remembering. If you're here this evening to listen from your precious day, you've taken time to listen to this presentation, you're here because you are here to remember what you already know. And my goal is to help invoke that memory within you so that whatever comes up, we get to discuss about it towards the later part of this presentation. But guess what? It is boring when somebody starts to just start a presentation with slides and slides. Let's just take a detour. How about we hear a story first? Anyone up for a story? Everyone likes a story? Anybody likes? Yeah, okay. So let's hear some story first, okay? Here's a story of once upon a time. This is wonderful, beautiful woman. She lived a perfect life. She had a 2-car garage home. She was an engineer and an MBA. She had a successful career with 6-figure income. And she had 2 amazing children. And she had a picture perfect marriage, right? This is what everybody thinks as their dream life. And this is the heroine of, I'm calling her the heroine because it's a female. It's the heroine of our story. But guess what? Underneath this external appearances that was put forth, there were things that were, that was happening within her. One aspect of her was trying highly to control and her outcomes, her results. As a child, in her childhood, she was called dominating by her childhood friends. She refused promotions because she was afraid of failure. And she was trying to control everything she could because there was a deep-seated fear of failure within her. There's also an element where she moved from a childhood dominating behavior. She became completely opposite over a period of time late into her teens and growing into her teens, into her adulthood. She became highly compliant. And she got into a relationship there where she felt like if she were to do anything that she loved, she felt guilty. And she was somebody who's like, no conflict, please. I don't want to deal with conflict. And I would rather say yes and just deal with the consequences that I feel or she feels, and says, you know what? I just don't want to hurt anybody. I'll just say yes and I'll go along, and hated questioning authorities. And the third element of her facet, which wasn't exposed outside, but it was behavioral to her, was she decided to distance herself from others. She didn't have any friends. And she was so afraid of shining her brilliance because she felt like people are going to judge her, people are going to get jealous of her. And she had this deep-seated fear of driving in highways. But then something happened. So you're looking at a persona who had an external picture that was beautiful, and internally, all this dynamics was going on within her. And over 7 consecutive years, a big set of shifts happened in her life. She went through a separation and a divorce. Her older son decided to choose to live with his father. She lost her home. And in all of this change that was happening, she built the courage to figure how to drive on highways. She overcome her fear of driving on highways. And then she had to traverse the death of her father. And she started her business. She quit her full-time job. She said, I'm not doing this anymore. And then her mother was diagnosed with cancer. And she also had to accept the fact that her son decided to drop out of a college that he wanted to go to. And last but not the least, she had to traverse and witness the death of her mother. This pretty much, think about everything a person does not want to go through in their journey of life. And all of that was packed for her in a matter of 7 consecutive years that turned her life upside down. But in the process, she learned something. She learned that she could overcome her fears. She learned that she can claim her power instead of being compliant. And she developed courage. She realized what her purpose was. And she said, you know what? Life isn't happening to me. All that's unfolding is yes, it's true. But then I also get to co-create what I want in my life. So there was a shift in her inside that resulted in the outside manifesting in this form. She became a singer and a model and a producer of short films. She became certified as a coach and a healer. As a visual artist, she started selling her art. She became an entrepreneur. She became an investor. She became an angel investor for some of the startups. Her older son, decided to follow his dreams in the music space, and he made more money as much as she made in her first years of her career. The younger son is completely interested in basketball and is thriving in that, and she's a beautiful co-parent at this time. And with that, I introduce me and my backdrop. This is my story. And the reason I decided to start this presentation with the story is twofold. One, if you're wondering who is Ajitha and why should I listen to her about what's next for leaders in VUCA world, I do want you to know that my life and my journey in the past 7 years have been nothing short of being volatile, ambiguous, complex, and change-driven, right? And I bring all of that transformation that I have traversed to this space with all of you. And in the process of what I have gone through in my personal transformation, I've, in a part of me which is very corporate oriented, also tried to connect the dots between all the agile transformation that I was seeing, that the organizations were embarking on with so many different frameworks, from SAFe to Scrum to and everything in between. There was the deep-seated need for transformation that was, that was desired by organizations, yet was seemingly out of reach. We had so many of us becoming agile leaders, transformational leaders, yet when it comes to transformation, not many of us are really ready for what transformation really looks like. And for me, having traversed this over the past 7 years, what became very clear to me is this, and I'm going to quote it based off of a statement from Dana Zohar. This is a statement from her book, which I will be referencing quite a bit in the beginning of this first half of the presentation. Most transformation programs satisfy themselves with shifting the same old furniture in the same old room. Some seek to throw the furniture away, but real transformation requires that you redesign the room itself, or in my case, in my life example, I had to blow up the old room in order to make the new possible. And what that required of me, I'm connecting the dots with my personal transformation, and I will do so throughout this presentation, is it requires that we change the thinking behind our thinking, which means I had to rewire my brain, because I had to question every assumption that I had, what I could and couldn't do, or what I should and shouldn't do. I had to question every belief that I had held about myself to then reframe it to become the new me. And that's required of us in the corporate space, where we need to rewire our corporate brains. This is why the statement superly resonated with me when I read her book. By the way, Dana Zohar is a physics and philosophy from MIT, and she did a postgrad work combining things that you would never think of combining, which is physics, psychology, religion, philosophy, with a physics background, and that too from Harvard. And there are 3 books of hers that I had the opportunity to read, and some of the, I would say most of the content from today has been extracted and extrapolated with other stuff that I have read as well. The book that she talks about, this particular quote, is called Rewiring the Corporate Brain. I have it right here. You can, this book actually is now probably out of edition, because she has come up with a newer book, which is going to be the focus of later part of our presentation, Quantum Leader. Okay. So with that said, what does transformation really entail? Transformation requires that we link the change to some sort of a meaning. The reason I embarked on my personal transformation, by the way, divorce and separation were by choice, by me. And I embarked on that journey because I was seeking meaning. I was seeking answer to the question, who am I? Am I here just to do all that I've been told to do? The 9 to 5, taking care of kids, putting everybody else before myself, my needs, my desires. When am I going to find my happiness? What is the meaning of this existence? You know, all these questions that you get, they surface up for us. But most often than not, we push them to the side. But true transformation requires that we have to link that change to a meaning. And I was seeking that meaning that allowed me the opportunity to step into a space of courage to then be able to make that change. And it's not very different for our organizational transformation either. So first, let's acknowledge this. Any transformation or even navigating a VUCA world, fundamentally, it is painful. It was painful for me. It continues to be painful at times. I'm not going to discount it by any means. And yes, meaning yes, and also a pain you're trying to solve for. So you are absolutely right, Om. And this is where I'm headed to, right? It's you will make the change when the cost of the change is not perceived to be higher than the cost of the pain that you're holding, right? At some point, the pain overtakes the cost of change. You're like, I'm going for this because I can't stay where I am. That is what leads to the transformation. So it hurts, it's painful, Even worse, it is slow. I've been on this journey for 7 years now, and I feel like I've just gotten started. I'm not done yet. I don't know when I will ever be done. Is it comfortable? Heck no, because my life doesn't look anything like what it was 7 years ago. You know, like the messy middle. I feel like I'm right in the bang in the middle of that right now. Messy middle. The old is gone, the new is not here. It is not fun, simply put. But then the question becomes, how do we shift our perspective? How do we even address this? If it's not fun, okay, it hurts, it's painful, it's slow, it's uncomfortable, whether it's my personal transformation or organizational transformation, each of us are leaders. We're sitting in the middle of the messy middle of our organizational transformations. And if you are an enterprise agile coach, you are part of the process which is leading that transformation. So then it really becomes then it is for us to acknowledge that yes, it is hurting, it is painful, it is taking the time, etc. But before we go forward, let's take a step back and ask, what got us here? Because it's important for us to look at how did we get here in the first place before we look at, okay, what's next for us? Okay, so this is, again, next few slides are all a summary extract of what I have gathered from Rewiring the Corporate Brain book by Dana Zohar. So the first thing is, what got us here is that we started with Newtonian organization, or our entire top-down hierarchical, bureaucratic control at every level, trying to control, getting certainty, predictability. It's either this or that. All of this is foundational in the way we started with our organizational structure back in the days of Industrial Revolution, with Newtonian physics as the base. That's what our organizations were modeled off of. So then what's the problem? What's the downside of that? The downside of that is that it's assumed that people at the top know everything, people below are clueless. It's assumed that if we give freedom, that means we're going to lack control. We can't control these people if we allow them to do whatever they want to do. First of all, the assumption is employees don't know what they're doing. Second of all, if we give them freedom, we have no control. And then you can bring your whole self to the workplace. You have to put a picture. I'm the professional self that looks nicely suited and in a particular format, versus personal self who looks completely different once the person reaches back home. You can bring all of yourself. And then the companies expect loyalty, but don't want to commit to employees' problems, solving problems for employees. And employees want loyalty and commitment from the company, but don't want to commit back to that loyalty. There's all these hard boundaries that have been created, which is the challenge that is becoming even more prominent. And that's what embarked us on Agile Transformation, right? Organizations felt the rigidity when the technological revolution took on. Our organizations couldn't function in this tight, hard boundary-based structure. So there was a need that prompted all of us to step towards Agile transformation. So now where are we, right? Let's take a look at where are we now. Now that we have embarked on this transformation, we've been here, I don't know for how many years, maybe one of you probably have better statistics on how many years we've been through this Agile transformation journey, so to speak. Where we are right now is networked organizations. If any of you are safe agilists here, we know we have tried to do the dual operating model, right? Network, hierarchy, kind of blend the two, because we can't get rid of the hierarchy. It seems to be too rooted. So let's bring the network and make it like a combination. I am a safe SPC myself, so I'm not, don't get me wrong. Everything has a merit. Everything has a reason why it has been formed, thought, formulated. Networked organizations are on the other spectrum. Oh, there's so much uncertainty and ambiguity. Let's distribute the power. Let's still have control through familiarity. Keep the boundaries a little ambiguous. Let's have some shared responsibility. And in terms of physics, you look, the networked organizations are more wave-like versus Newtonian organizations are particle-like. So here is how the comparison works out. And I'm not going to read through this. The foundation of this page comparison is one thing. Both these models have a challenge that they both try to get and rely on stability. When you're in a VUCA world, that is one of the things that we will always struggle with, stability. We are trying to rely on stability in both these models. And when there is an unexpected change, we're not great at dealing with it. It's weak. And we don't want the unexpected. We want to kind of figure a way how not to deal with the unexpected. And guess what? It doesn't work in our world today because pandemic, if anything, has shown us that unexpected is going to be the norm. We just saw what a disruptive process ChatGPT brought in a few weeks, and what GPT-4 has done to all of us. It's insane. When my younger son tells me, "Mom, ChatGPT, create a meal plan." It orders the entire groceries through Instacart. I don't have to do anything. That's the new gen for you. That's future for us. How can we not, thrive? We got to figure a way to thrive in the unexpected, right? So now the question is, okay, we have compared Newtonian. We are networked in some sense. That's where we are. Now, where are we going next? So that we can then talk about what's next for us as leaders. So here is where we are headed next, quantum organizations. What does that mean and what does that feel like? What does it look like? Quantum organizations are holistic, which means we are both and. It's not either or, it's both and, which means we can be particle-like, we can be wave-like. That means we are more flexible. There's flexible borders. And this is a very important statement that I felt truly resonating with, also because of my own journey, right? Ever since I embarked on this transformation, I feel like I'm at the edge of order and chaos. There are times when I feel like there's order, there are times that it's completely chaotic. And sometimes I feel like my role is to kind of bring some order from chaos, right? That's the world we are in. There's so much we don't know, that we cannot predict, we cannot plan. We can to some extent, but we got to also be able to adapt, going back to being agile. And here it's bottom up and emerging. And I loved Dana's analogy to a jazz jam session. A jazz jam session is so different from a conductor-oriented musical presentation. A jazz jam session, you don't know what you're going to be playing. You don't know what the output is going to be like. Everybody is coming in and they're improvising as they go. So much creativity is born because you're allowing that ability to allow things to move with flexible boundaries and be self-organized. So this is where we are headed next. And I can relate so much to it just purely from my own journey, personal life, almost how I feel on an everyday basis. Now comes the question, let's compare. And again, I'm not going to read this slide, but the main thing I want to show is quantum organizations are rooted in dialogue, which is one of the reasons why I said I want to finish this presentation. I want to really listen to all of you, how this lands, what this brings up, etc. Right? It's dialogue oriented and more importantly, open to change and thrive on unexpected. How can we leverage what's happening in the environment right now? Again, I'll go to artificial intelligence. How can we make the best use of it instead of being threatened by it, instead of trying to constrain it or move away from it or be fearful about it? So thriving on the unexpected becomes the norm for quantum organizations. So with that said, again, I didn't mention this. You're welcome to note your questions down because I do want to finish the content that I want to offer and then come back to dialogue and Q&A. So now comes the question. What's next for us as leaders? We've seen the navigation, Newtonian, network, quantum organization. So Ajitha, what's next for us as leaders? That's what you came to hear about in this session. So we're going to go right there. I'm just looking at the comment, order from chaos. That order is also a relative concept. Absolutely. Time factors into it. Yes. Jazz jams require participants to accept what there is as being as valid as anything else. Yes. First acceptance of what is, and then be able to move forward. Totally. Thank you for that, Om. So the question then becomes, what's next for us as leaders? Well, quantum organizations need quantum leaders. And we are expected to shift. No, it shouldn't be news to any of you here. And I am now bringing in another book that has been an instrumental reason for me stepping into leadership coaching, which is the book called Mastering Leadership by Bob Anderson and Bill Adams. This is the book. Amazing book. And this quote really stood out. Critical prerequisite to effective leadership of an organization is becoming an effective leader of oneself. It starts with us. It starts with you and I, right? Self-leadership. So what does that look and feel like, right? This is where I'm going to introduce you to what's next for us as leaders. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this particular 5 levels of leadership. This is directly from the Leadership Circle website. It's called 5 Levels of Leadership. And I'm inviting us today to step into creative, integral, unitive space of leadership. If you're wondering, okay, what are all these levels? What do they really mean? Let's take a look at that. Okay. Question I want you to ponder before I go deep into each of these levels. I want you to pay attention to when you lead in whatever capacity, title, role that you're playing. When you lead, who shows up? Which version of your leader shows up? Okay. So the first explanation I'm going to give is egocentric. We probably all are familiar with this type of a leader where it's all about my way or highway. I know it all. It's my way or highway, autocratic, controlling, dictatorial, oppressive. And none of us want to even do it, none of us want to be associated with this kind of a leader. We may have worked for one. We don't even consider this person as a leader. That's that, right? So now the second is reactive. This is again, for the record, these I will statements or my way, highway statement, these are my interpretations of the personality in an example form. It's not verbatim from anywhere, so I just want to disclose that. A reactive leader says, I will ask your inputs as employees, but decision is vested with me and my leadership team. So there's an element of fairness, financial support, there's a hierarchy, layered bureaucracy, and importantly, requires loyalty and obedience. If you're not obedient, then yeah, you're not playing in the sandbox with me, right? This is where we're talking about. When we talk about up-leveling our leadership, we're talking about moving away from egocentric reactive into the creative space, where a creative leader is authoring the vision, but is also enrolling everyone in the vision, helping us discover, each one of us, discover how this vision enables me to fulfill my personal purpose collectively. The key statement that I want to call out here is this. To make a transition from reactive to creative leadership, we no longer ignore the unique call of the soul. This is a statement that is verbatim from the book, Mastering Leadership, where Bob Anderson and Bill Adams explain this. But I want to call this because this will tie back to another element of the up-leveling of our leadership that I'll talk about in just a few minutes. Okay? Wow, I'm so behind on time. Sorry, I just had to check that. All right, integral. This is much higher level in terms of where our focus, the perspective is, right? From an organization, we are going into the big, sustainable, long-term global vision and welfare, where unitive, it's taking us to a whole level of planetary scale, where we're talking about we're all each other, and we have a perspective of unity, and the ecosystem is our body. So, I was supposed to ask this question. Okay, now that I've exposed how much percentage is of our leaders in the world are sitting at at an egocentric level, it's 5%. Who wants to take a guess on what percentage it is in reactive? I want to get some engagement here. Take a random guess of what percentage of leaders are sitting in the reactive space. Go ahead.
60.
60, okay.
70%.
70, Tarsh says 70. Who else?
30.
30 says Om. Okay. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Tarsh is pretty close. 70, right there. I thought it was 75, but it's 70. Yeah, bang on. 70% of us are sitting in the reactive space. There's again no judgment here, right? There's no judgment. It is an observation as to where are we collectively in our leadership journey. Okay. Creative, 20%, 4% in integral, 1% in unitive, 1%. Okay. And here Marshall says, and here I was hoping we would all be creatives. Well, there's a reason why I shifted from enterprise agile coaching to creative consciousness leadership coaching, right? There's a reason for that. So with that said, quantum organizations need quantum leaders, and quantum leaders, in this case, I've mapped the definition of quantum leaders to the creative, integral, and unitive levels of mastering leadership. The message is very simple, my friends. Quantum leaders know that they are the primary tool for organizational transformation. And that's my one message to you. If you don't get anything after this slide that I speak about, you've gotten what you came here for. What's next for us as leaders in the VUCA world is that realizing, remembering, and recognizing that we are the tools for any transformation we are embarking on, whether it is organizational or whether it is planetary. And then comes the question, what does it take to be a quantum leader? And this is where I'm going to step into a space where my brain has mishmashed everything that I have read. So I'm going to bring it all together, hopefully on some level. In the simplest term, what it takes to be a quantum leader is a shift in two aspects, intelligence and consciousness. Okay, I'm introducing the word consciousness here deliberately, and it may have multiple meanings to multiple people, but I want you to hang in there till I finish my thought process. And of course, through the dialogue, we'll have more conversation. Shift in intelligence. No, I am not talking about artificial intelligence because it's already here. It is already disrupting the way we do things, the way we live. It is going to continue disrupting. The shift in consciousness and lead in intelligence I'm talking about is here. The very first intelligence we all have been exposed to is IQ. And when I was growing up, there was everything was, what's your IQ level? Do an IQ test. It was all about IQ, right? If you think about IQ, it was about left brain. It is all about linear or serial processing of your brain, focus on material capital. And when you think about relation to yourself, it is what I think. It's all about brain, the head brain, what I think, and mind. Now, the whole world of corporate space is focused on what?
EQ.
EQ, right brain, parallel processing, social capital, relationship, and focused on, in relation to me, what I feel, my body. A lot of feelings are held somatic. The word somatic is very familiar for us now. Now the next shift in intelligence that is going to be required fundamentally for us as quantum leaders is spiritual intelligence. And I want you to hold the word spiritual lightly. Don't get, I don't know how many of you are atheists here and non-religious or religious. I want you to put all of that aside. Just keep the word spiritual pure and simple for the moment, okay? Spiritual intelligence is about all aspects of your brain, synchronous, and the capital is really about your spirit. And the relation to self really is who I am or what I am. And the deeper part of connection there is with your spirit, the spirit of who you are, right? This is the shift that we are now ready for. In order for us to be quantum leaders, we've got to shift up, level up our intelligence into the SQ space. Again, SQ is focused on really answering the questions of meaning and value. The same questions that embarked me on my personal transformation, which by the way is a spiritual transformation. It was, or it still is, it was induced by a spiritual awakening, I would say. And I don't shy away from sharing my story about it because pain was a big factor that pushed me into the space of really asking that question on meaning. Who am I? What's my purpose? Why do I even exist? What's my value? What am I here to offer? Those questions, when you ask, is pushing you towards your purpose, right? SQSI is not about being religious. It's really about answering those deep-seated questions for each one of us. And in that context, I'm going to switch into answering the next thing, which is consciousness. How do we shift our consciousness in quantum leadership or as quantum leaders, okay? And here I want to introduce, I don't know, how many of you know about David Hawkins? Have heard about David R. Hawkins? Some of you are, okay, I see Om, Meenakshi. Okay, I know Meenakshi is a big fan of David Hawkins' work. So I'm introducing to you what's called a map of consciousness produced by David or Hawkins. And this is available in the book. This is the book, Map of Consciousness, my favorite book. And the reason I'm bringing this is because of simple example to the impact, right? Each of the level of consciousness is tied to an emotion, and it's tied to a logarithmic scale of frequency associated with that emotion, okay? And in his book, David Hawkins says that one individual at the level of 700, which is the enlightenment level, counterbalances 70 million individuals below level 200. Just look at the magnitude. If you and I committed our rest of our journey in this planet to improving our, or increasing our, I should say, increasing our consciousness level, We can just impact the planet by that one choice, one choice. Okay, you say, you know what, Ajitha, enlightenment, I can reserve for next life, or if there is one such thing called next life, can I, what's the impact of something smaller? Take the level of 300, willingness. If one individual at the level of 300 can counterbalance 90,000 individuals below the level of 200. So I can say, from my own journey's experience, the courage to step into my purpose, asking that question, who am I, what am I here for? I have somehow shifted the consciousness, not just for myself, but for those around me too. I don't know who they are, but I know that I have simply by this one reference point. Okay, so quantum leaders, spiritual intelligence, shift in consciousness, these are going to be foundational for us. And here is my last attempt to connect the dot between mastering leadership and shift in consciousness. Okay, this is my rudimentary mapping. This is the first time I've ever shared this because this is what my brain mashed up and created. Okay, so here on the right, you see the mapping and the logarithmic scale with the map of consciousness. On the left, you see the mastering leadership, 5 levels of leadership. And you can see below neutrality, we are sitting with force. As leaders, we are enforcing things. That's where the egocentric and reactive levels of leadership fall. And in reactive, in Mastering Leadership book, there are 3 different fears that we are dealing with. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of vulnerability. As long as we are sitting with any one of these 3, we are holding ourselves in the reactive space. So when I gave my initial example, controlling, complying, and protecting in my story that I shared, these are the 3 dynamics. Fear of failure leads to controlling behavior. Fear of vulnerability leads to protecting behaviors. Fear of rejection leads to complying behaviors. If we are holding ourselves hostage to this fear of any of these 3, we are stuck in the identity, I am what I do. People that fear failure and are controlling have identity hooks called I am what I do, I am my achievements, I am my results. If you define yourself by any of those statements, my friends, you are being held hostage in your reactive behavior. Fear of vulnerability. I am my ideas, I am my brilliance, I am my smartness. Fear of rejection. I am my relationships, I am who you think I am. Those identity beliefs we are holding are going to keep us in the reactive space. So what does it take to shift in our reactive into the courage, into the creative space? Courage. Courage is the tipping point, right? That courage is going to allow us to shift our identity. And when we shift that identity, we are able to bring that new consciousness as quantum leaders into quantum organizations. And the next level of tipping point, of course, beyond neutrality, you're stepping into your power. You're not using force. You're powerful as a leader because you've stepped into your consciousness that is elevated in frequency. And in order for us to move from creative into integral, love is that tipping point. And unfortunately today, nobody talks about leadership and love in the same breath. And I made it a point of my journey from this point on to really bring the 2 together, because to love is to lead and to lead is to love. That's just how I see it. And last but not the least, shift in consciousness needs shift in our identity of who we believe we are. There's a typo there, who we believe we are. And that's the reason why I am now a recovering enterprise agile coach, stepping fully into being a creative consciousness leadership coach. Question, my friends, are you ready to shift your beliefs and rise in your consciousness to be the quantum leader you were born to be? With that, I'm done with my talk, and I'm excited to have at least 10 minutes to have a dialogue on this. So I'm going to stop sharing and welcome you all to share what came up for you, questions, comments. I know that it really felt like I was going on a very high-speed train, and if you felt so, you're not alone, because I felt the same way. So welcome.
Well, Ajitha, I just want to say thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story. I do appreciate that. It just takes it takes guts, and I think you definitely portray that. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Om. Thank you.
I think what I resonate most with the whole story, what was most meaningful was that everything it was resonating with me. It didn't sound like a foreign concept. And I think because you weaved it into your story, I think the concepts became so clear, because you're not just saying, okay, this person wrote such and such, so you should do it. No, you're saying that made an impact in my life, and here's where I struggled, and here's what I gained. And I think that is so meaningful. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Toby. Thank you for offering this opportunity to even, put this all together. Thanks to this speaking event, my brain came up with all that it came up with, and I was able to bring it all together for all of
So
us.
we want to give you a season ticket. You're welcome to come back every year and speak. We'll reserve April for you. How about that? You come back and tell us new stories.
Yes,
April showers bring flowers.
Too, not just you.
Yes,
Toby? April showers bring flowers. So we'll have Ajitha come and shower her learning on us, so we all can blossom together.
That will be absolutely my honor. And as I said, I feel like I'm just beginning. I'm feeling like I'm just beginning my journey. I'm in the messy middle, like I said. So very happy to come at a frequent time frame and share, hey, this is what has unfolded since then. So for sure.
The one thing I want to share from my journey, which is quite, I won't say exactly the same, but similar. One aspect which you, perhaps because of time, you didn't mention, is that you will also be surrounded by people who are going to tell you that you're not going to succeed, right? And people who are ready and waiting to tell you, I told you so. Especially when you're making a big change, the resistance, you have to fight the resistance from within, but also manage the relationship that you have built, right? The so-called support system, right? The support system may or may not exist after changes happen. And the only person who can make that distinction and decide what is best for you is you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do believe that as you shift in consciousness, you attract newer circle of people around you. And that is something I've seen, experienced as well. As that's why I said, when the old crumbles and the new shapes up, now the new thought process, new frequency, and I use the word frequency in the context of you being at a different type of thinking, you're able to bring similar, people into your space that then allow, support you and allow you to kind of move forward in that direction too.
That's true. Yeah.
And very often when you find people that are resisting or saying, you won't succeed, there are two things that I've seen in my journey with that is, one, they probably are mirroring your own doubts that are somewhere deep down subconsciously present, but you haven't addressed it. Whenever that happened to me, Toby, all I did was, okay, in what way is this person mirroring my own lack of doubt or, lack of confidence in myself or presence of doubt in me? And, doing that inner reflection really helped. The minute I became really clear, that person either stopped saying it or didn't show up anymore, right? It's one of those shifts that happen. So that's an opportunity to kind of.
So your inner radar is picking that up from them, but it really is coming from you. Wow, interesting. Yeah.
Yes, I've seen that
That's
very
deep.
much happen. Thank you.
Ajitha, I just wanted to say great presentation. Thank you for sharing your story, and very insightful. Just a couple of things. You kind of mentioned quite a bit about artificial intelligence, right? So that's somewhat of an area that I dabble in to an extent. But I've been thinking about it that as artificial intelligence is based on predictive models, past algorithms, and past behavior, so to speak, right? So as we, as leaders, as we evolve towards the new dimensions and thinking outside towards quantum thinking, for example, right? As we elevate ourselves, it's all about agility. It's all about the unknown, how we improvise, right? So as leaders rely more on AI now, on the past behaviors, on predictive models, on data, how do they balance the empathy or the grooming of their fellow workforce, their peers, for example, how do they groom them into leaders, while at the same time relying so much on past models and AI and trusting what the machines are telling them? How do you see that balance coming into play in the future? Because it seems like there is a dichotomy there, right? There's a push and a pull dynamic there that's brewing.
Yeah, a great question. I have been pondering on this, believe it or not, and this is again my 2 cents on it, and I would love to hear anybody else's inputs and perspectives as well. The more we rely on artificial intelligence to kind of predict and help us in our path forward as on the corporate space or the overall space, the way I equate it is that a lot of things that were dependent on our intellectual ability is now getting outsourced into the artificial intelligence space. So the computing, the analysis, all of that is getting given to the code that then does that for us, predicts that for us. More so because of that, I feel like the role for us as leaders, it is going to require for us to help our teams find that same answers to the meaning behind what are they here for, what is it that they are driven by, what they find as their purpose, and help align our teams to that aspect. So there is an element of continuing to have empathy, deepening our connection to our team overall, and helping them find that deeper or elevate in the spiritual intelligence. As we are elevating ourselves in the spiritual intelligence space, we are also helping them elevate. And then, and I still don't have the answer to this question, which is the dichotomy between looking at the past with AI and using that, and looking in the future with in terms of how we handle our quantum organizations and the VUCA world. I feel this is just my initial response is that it is a loop that will continue to evolve. As we evolve in our spiritual intelligence, getting more deeper in understanding of who we are, what we are here for, our meaning that we are deriving, we're going to kind of feed that back into the process to take care of this artificial intelligence to continue to evolve through the process. But I do feel that the more we have AI in our reality, the more it's going to push us towards connecting deeper within ourselves. That's just how I see it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because like here we are talking about, I mean, the notion has been that AI doesn't have a soul, right? And here we're talking about spirituality in the sense, right? And then evolving that and going in a loop. So eventually you're grooming a soul for the AI, some themes like that, right? So eventually they become a spiritual being themselves. And then where are we, right, as human beings? So it's just interesting where this is all leading to.
Yeah, we are at the edge of order and chaos. So welcome to quantum world.
Yeah, and hence VUCA, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Oh, great question. Thank you. Any other thoughts, questions, dialogue? Go ahead, Meenakshi.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mike might want to share something about the closing because it's 8 o'clock. Oh. So I'll hand it over to Mike.
Okay. Thank you for the reminder. I haven't seen Kobe's shameless plug for the next month, but so it's 8 o'clock. We should respect everybody's time, but Ajitha, if you are interested in sticking around for a few more minutes, we can continue this if there are other questions. Otherwise, we can let everybody go. Before we do that, we should mention that our next event is on May 25th, Thursday, May 25th, and it's with Alan Zucker. Alan Zucker is a coach, a consultant, and an instructor. He's done a number of keynote speaking engagements, and he has 25 years of experience managing projects, project execution, etc. And he will be our speaker next month, and we're looking forward to hearing him as well. With that, maybe we can stop the recording, and again, if there are a couple of last questions, then maybe we can take those. And again, Ajitha, thank you.
I just put the link in chat.